Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 8 of the 2021 FIA Nations Cup taking place at Tsukuba Circuit with the N300 cars. Let's get this started. For this lap guide, we'll be using the Toyota SFR Racing Concept. We are on the sports hard tires and brake balance was set to -1 or 1 to the front. Bring yourself towards the left side of the track, and you want to brake just after you pass the path that is on the left before the solid wall on the left starts. So I'll show you exactly where I start to brake before the shadow that covers up the entire track. Brake hard for a short while, slowly ease off of the brakes, going for a late apex so you can get on the throttle as soon as you can and get a fast exit. Then just as you hit the apex of this mini right turn, so just a tad bit before I start to brake right here, you want to brake hard for a short while, hug the inside of the turn, go for a late apex once again, and get on the throttle as soon as you can. Bring yourself towards the left, and before the barrier on the left changes color, use a quick burst of braking, just fine tuning the car to navigate through this right and left turns. Bring yourself towards the left, and just after the little green turf on the left starts, that is where you want to start to brake. Brake hard for a short while, ease off of the brakes as you turn in, and go for a late apex so you can get on the throttle as soon as you can and aim for a faster exit. Now for this final long right turn, you want to look for the pit sign that is on the right. Use a little bit of braking before you pass it. So you just want to control your braking, slowly bring yourself towards the apex of the turn, which is where the curb on the right ends, and do some throttle control as you get closer to the apex. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. Before I do talk about the strategies, I do want to note that some of these cars that I'll be mentioning have to be upgraded or downgraded to N300. So from the home screen, go to Home, Garage, select the car in question. So for example, let's say we want to downgrade the Ford F-150, change on over to that car, and because this car is an N400 car, we have to downgrade it to N300. So if we bring down the power ratio, you'll see that you actually need to increase the power level. So if your car needs to do that, go ahead and do that. It'll cost you a bit of mileage points, and just decrease the power so you can bring it down to N300 so that when you enter the Nations Cup race, the car will appear on your car selection list. But anyways, now let's go on over to the qualifying strategies or the qualifying session, in which you have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. So you'll have around 3 to 4 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible if you decide to go through it back to back, so you don't do the jump out and jump back in strategy. So in terms of this qualifying session, this one's going to be a little straightforward. For the most part, you might find it a good idea to want to qualify by yourself because you have all these tight and twisty turns, so there's a chance that if you get too close to someone during your qualifying run, you'll have to slow yourself down, which will ruin your own qualifying time. So you want to space yourself out a bit so you don't have to worry about your own lap time getting interrupted. And just like the Autopolis round that we had a couple weeks ago for the Nations Cup, you want to try to get the best qualifying time possible. Start as high up as you can, because this race is going to be similar to that of the Autopolis race, where it is a pretty short race. This race is going to be around 16 minutes long, and this track is also pretty difficult to get any sort of overtaking done. So the higher up you start, the less shenanigans you have to deal with, the less people you have to try to overtake. So if there's one thing that you really want to focus down for this race, it's going to be your qualifying session. And let's say that you finish up a qualifying lap or you mess up during your qualifying lap, you can press options, exit, and then for the lobbies, it's enter course. In the actual FIA day race itself, the button is called qualifying. So this will put you back into the pit stops without going through the pit stop animation. So you just spawn back at the pit box, come out, and then you can just do an out lap and then another qualifying lap. And would I suggest doing this? I'm going to say no, because the tower isn't that high. It's a ×3, so tower is not an issue. I would only suggest doing it if your own lap time gets ruined. So you can have that in the back of your mind just in case you need to do that, and then just try to exit out into a pocket of clean space so you don't have to worry about getting your own lap time ruined. But assuming that you don't have to do that at all, you just keep going round and round, you should have around 3 to 4 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. For the race, we are doing 15 laps at Tsukuba Circuit with N300 cars. This is a grid start, so bring the traction control to 1, and shortly after the race starts, you can then bring it back down to 0 or whatever value you normally have it set to. And shortly after the race starts, just try to bring yourself into the inside of turn 1. Just be on the defensive, as the first lap or so, especially the first couple of turns in lap 1, is going to be pretty chaotic. So just try to keep yourself on the track, try to defend your position until things kind of start to clear out and everyone starts to space themselves out. So with this race, fuel is a ×3, so fuel is not an issue at all, and the tower is a ×3, and since we're on the sports hard tires, they last a long time, which means that tower is also not an issue at all. So this race is a pretty short and sweet, no stop race. You don't have to worry about the fuel nor the tire wear. This race is more or less similar to that of the Autopolis short race that we had a couple weeks ago with the Group 4 cars, where things can get pretty chaotic, especially with this being a short 16-minute race. And with this track being pretty twisty, it's also going to be pretty difficult to get any sort of overtaking done. But because this is a short race again, do expect some chaos to happen. Do expect some people to get a little argy-bargy and go for dive bombs if they see an opportunity to do so. So for the most part, just try to keep a consistently fast pace. Make it really difficult for those behind you to take advantage of you. And that's kind of it. Take advantage of those who are making mistakes in front of you, as there's not going to be many opportunities to get an overtake done. And also just be careful about people getting really argy-bargy or dive bombing, because that can happen in this race. And taking a quick look at the tire wear and the fuel at the very end of the race, tire wear, not an issue, and fuel, not an issue as well. So this is a pretty easy no-stop race where you don't really have to worry about managing tires nor fuel. But now that we've pretty much finished with the general race environment and strategies, let's go ahead and take a look at which cars are actually going to be pretty good for this race. Don't mind the fireworks. So for this race, or for this guide, I asked you guys in a community post which cars I should test. You guys gave me a whole bunch of recommendations, so what I did, I went ahead and tested a lot of these cars. And the way I wanted to go with this testing was that I will have the custom race set up where it simulates a race, so fuel and tire wear is on. And if a car was not able to get a 1 minute and 3 second lap time, then its test run would end by lap 6. So what you're seeing right now are some of the cars that you guys recommended, and these cars were not able to get a 1 minute and 3 second lap time. In other words, these cars are too slow for one reason or for another. They could be way too slidey, they could be way too understeery, or they're just too plain slow, and they are not viable to be used in this race. So you're going to want to steer clear from these cars and use another car that can be much faster, that has a lot more potential here at Tsukuba for the Nations Cup race. And we're quickly going through these cars just so we can save ourselves a bit of time. And once again, if these cars were not able to get a 1 minute and 3 second lap time, then their runs ended early. And we're eventually going to start to slow things down a bit as we're getting closer and closer to cars that could get into the 1 minute and 3 second lap times. The Mazda Rosa touring car, unfortunately, just a tad bit too slow to get into the 103s as it's very slidey at N300. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage can get into the 103s, but it is a huge struggle to get into there, so this car is unfortunately not viable for the race. The next car coming up is the KTM Crossbow, and this car, it doesn't feel that great to drive around here at Tsukuba. It can get into the 103s, but it's very difficult to get the most potential out of it, so I don't suggest using the KTM Crossbow. The Ferrari F50, I also don't suggest using it as it can get into the 103s, but the thing is that this is a power car and it's not going to do that great at a handling track. Now here's where things get really interesting, as we're now going to talk about the potentially best cars for this race, starting off with the 2020 Toyota GR Supra RZ. So this car, I'm going to classify it as an all-rounder car. It has good handling, it has good acceleration, and it has good speed. And you think that a car like the Supra wouldn't do good at a handling track like Tsukuba, but it actually does pretty well, and that was a bit of a surprise to me. So this car, once again, good handling, so it can do a pretty decent job going through the turns, going through the hairpins, and it has pretty good speed, which comes in pretty handy when you're going through the back straight. So overall, this car, once again, it is a pretty good all-rounder car, and since it can do the job well when it comes to handling, speed, and acceleration, it's going to be one of the best cars to use for this race, and it's going to be one of the alternative best cars to use for this race. And I say alternative because there is one car that is the best here at Tsukuba, but the 2020 GR Supra, it's not a bad choice, although one of the negative things about the 2020 Supra is that it does get a bit slidey, which can be extremely noticeable through this last turn. So if you come through this turn a little too hot, then you're going to slide and you'll lose quite a bit of time. And it doesn't have as much torque as the 2019 Supra, which we'll talk about in a moment. And you'll especially notice this as you're going through the hairpins, and you're kind of forced to shift down one gear. So let's say, for example, the first turn, you have to go into second gear. And I think this turn as well, you have to go down to second gear so you can get a bit more power, then go up to third gear, and it creates a bit of an awkward experience. And if you stay on, let's say, third gear, then you do risk getting bogged down. So the 2020 Supra, it is a good car. It is a good alternative to the best car, which I'll mention here. It's the Toyota SFR Racing Concept. This car is a good alternative, but there are some downsides which isn't as apparent in the 2019 Supra. So if you want an alternative to the Toyota SFR, a car that has a bit more of everything, that's not specialized on just one thing, then the 2020 Supra is one option or one alternative that you can use. The next one is the 2019 Supra. It basically drives very similar, almost identical to the 2020 Supra, but the 2019 Supra does things a little bit better, mostly because it has a bit more torque than the 2020 Supra. So with this car, the 2019 version that is, it doesn't have the problem of bogging down on the hairpins. At least it's not as apparent as that on the 2020 Supra. So in my personal opinion, I think the 2019 Supra is the better of the two, and if you were to choose one of the Supras for this race, I would highly suggest picking the 2019 Supra. And once again, it's almost identical to the 2020 Supra. It's a jack of all trades car. It does everything pretty well. It does slide around on the final turn, so be a little careful about it, and it has a really awesome launch, as you saw earlier in the video. And also, compared to the SFR, the 2019 and 2020 Supra can kind of instill a bit of fear onto the SFRs, mostly because these two cars have a bit of power, so when you're going through the back straight, you can easily overtake the SFRs, you can easily catch up to them, and you can easily drop them behind you. So that is one very apparent advantage over the SFRs, and especially at the grid starts. As long as you start on second gear with traction control at 1 for both the 2019 and 2020 Supra, you can easily walk away from the Toyota SFRs, and it's kind of hilarious to see that happen, and I'll show it again later in the video when I talk a bit more about the Toyota SFRs. So both the 2019 Supras and the 2020 Supra, they were able to get a 103.5, with the 2019 Supra being very slightly faster, but both of them were able to get a 16 minutes and 2 seconds, which is a pretty respectable time. Next up is the BMW M4. So this car also has a pretty good launch. It's not as good as the Toyota Supras, but this car still has a pretty respectable launch. It's better than the Toyota SFR's launch. This car, it handles a bit similarly to the Toyota Supras, but it trades in a bit of the handling for a bit more acceleration and speed. And you'd probably think that that would actually hurt the car, but no, it actually makes the car a bit better than the Supras here at Tsukuba Circuit. And that was a bit of an interesting thing to find out. And one of the other things about this car is that if you do it right, you can play around with the throttle so that you can have the rear of the car whip around and then get on the throttle to get a fast exit. It does require a bit of getting used to because this car does like to have a bit of wheel spin. It is a bit of a slidey boy, but once you get used to it, then this car can be a very strong candidate, a very strong alternative to the Toyota SFR racing concept. So the 2019 and 2020 Supra, along with the BMW M4, I would say don't sleep on it because these cars are actually pretty darn good. And with a bit more power and acceleration on the BMW M4, it'll even make the Supra struggle a bit to be able to keep up with it, especially on the back straight. And also, before I go on, make sure that for all these cars, bring the brake balance to -1 or 1 to the front, as the Supras and the M4 don't really like the brake balance at +1 for this race. But anyways, this car, it's a bit of a wild animal, but it is still a pretty fun car to drive. It's a really good alternative here, and in this race I was able to get a 103.6 with a really respectable time of a 16 minutes and 1 second. So if you're looking for an alternative to the SFR, you're looking for a car that has a bit more power than the Supras and is a bit more slidey, but you can control it, then I would suggest picking up the BMW M4. This car is another great alternative, and yeah, this car, it's a bit more lively, just like the Supras. It is a lot more enjoyable to drive than the SFR. And actually, let's go ahead and talk about the Toyota SFR. Alright, the Toyota SFR, which is going to be one of the go-to cars for this race. And the very first thing that is very bad about this car is that it has a very poor launch. So it takes about 20 million years for this car to be up and going, but once it does, then this car is where it starts to shine a little bit more, especially when you go through the turns. So the Toyota SFR racing concept is a pure handling car, and at a track like Tsukuba, this is a track where this car will shine. So you'll see this car doing really well in the qualifying, in the free practice time trial modes, and in the race it can do the job well. But the only thing is that you have the really poor start, the really poor grid start, which already puts it at a bit of a disadvantage. And then it doesn't have the acceleration or speed on the back straight. So if there's an M4 or a Supra right behind you, get ready to defend for your life because they're going to try to take full advantage of you. And if you're able to fly through these corners, then it's already going to make it pretty difficult for the power cars to try to get around you. So this car, it's a pretty stable car, and it just flies through the corners, especially because it has a bit of a downforce with its rear wing. So if you're looking for a car that is pretty easy to drive and that can handle these corners like a champion, then look no further than the Toyota SFR Racing Concept. Keyword racing concept. I think this car is originally an N400 car, so you do need to detune it down to N300. Just lower the power ratio in the car settings and you are good to go. And yeah, this car, it is a true handling car, and for a handling track like Tsukuba Circuit, this is where this car will shine the most. And at the end of the day, this car was able to get the best total time of 16 minutes flat, and also the best lap time with a 103.502. So this car, it can do the job really well here at Tsukuba, but there are some very clear disadvantages that can be present in this car that other cars can potentially take full advantage of. So at the start of the race, you're pretty much a sitting duck, but once you get going, if you're able to be very consistently fast with this car and just fly through the turns, then it's going to make it even harder for those power cars to catch up to you and potentially try to overtake you. And I'm going to show the issues with the SFR because its poor launch can already put it at a pretty huge disadvantage. So the car in pole position is in the SFR, so they'll appear towards the left side of the screen right now. Third place is also in the 2019 Supra, and here's the thing. The Supra, go to second gear, traction control at 1, and you're just going to go ahead and walk away from the SFR Racing Concept. So they're going to spend about 20 years trying to get up to speed, while the Supra, the other Supra and we already just walked away from them. So right away from the very start of the race, the SFR fell from first to third place. So that is one huge disadvantage of the SFR Racing Concept. And once again, with a track like Tsukuba, it is going to be pretty difficult to get the overtake done, especially at the back straight where the Supras and the M4s are at a big advantage. And here's another example where I was able to set myself up just right in the 2019 Supra to take full advantage of the SFR Racing Concept. And I'm just going to go ahead and with the faster exit, take full advantage of the SFR Racing Concept. I'm going pretty faster here, and I'm just going to go ahead, take the inside line. We're going to be going too wide through the final turn, and I still have a bit of that power to be able to still remain on the inside line and make it really difficult for the SFR Racing Concept to take its position back. And I'm actually going to get the position, and after that it's going to be pretty difficult for the SFR to take advantage of me unless if they go for a full dive bomb. But anyways, let's go ahead and check out places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So the main straight, or the quote-unquote main straight, one good place to try to get the overtake done, especially with the track being a bit wide into the first turn. After that, it's going to be very situational from here on out. If the car in front of you makes a pretty big mistake, then that is when you want to try to take advantage of them. Other than that, it's pretty much going to be a single file line. It's going to be really difficult to try to get a move done. Patience is key. If you try to battle out too early, then you risk losing a lot of time. The only penalty serving zone is on the back straight, so if you have to serve a penalty, you'll be serving it right here. And this is also pretty much the last place to get the overtake done on the back straight, especially if you're in a power car or if a car in front of you got a really bad exit. And that is pretty much it. So at the end of the day, this is a zero stop race where fuel and tire wear are not an issue. The Toyota SFR Racing Concept is the go-to car and it is a really good handling car here at Tsukuba, which fits the bill and makes it the best car, but there are some very clear disadvantages from its poor grid start and it having a poor acceleration and speed, which means that other alternative cars can come in and give it a really good competition, such as the 2019 Supra, the 2020 Supra, and the 2014 BMW M4. So there are a couple options out there for you to choose, and I would highly suggest just taking these cars out at least for the time trial. Give them a go, see which one suits your driving style the best for, and hopefully you're able to do well with whichever car you choose for the race. And I do want to announce something. So I am going to be taking a short leave after I make the daily race guides. So after this guide comes out, the daily race guides will be coming out sometime later today, which is Monday the 7th of June right now. So after I put out the new daily race guides, I'll be taking a short leave just so I can recharge my batteries because I've been pretty burnt out lately. And yeah, does this mean that I will not be making the manufacturer guide? I'm not sure if I'll be making the nation's guide next week, but I'll still be testing stuff out and I'll be putting up the strategy charts on my Twitter, and I'll make a compact version for the one on YouTube. So keep an eye out on the community post for that, and I'll try to have those up as soon as possible, so you'll still get the strategy charts, but you just won't be getting the videos. But anyways, that's all from me. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now and start working on the daily race guides because those are waiting for me like right now. So this is Mr. MCA wishing you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.